11-season veteran in the NBA, three-time NBA champion, a current agent now in the association business, and most importantly, he tapes his podcast with Gerald Brown after Susie and I do every single Tuesday on Podcast One. Good to see you, B.J. Armstrong.
Oh, Rich, it's always a pleasure. It's great to see you right after, so I get a chance to see the best, and then we come in and try to follow that up.
You know, we try. Look, it's the best acts need a proper setup. That's the way we view it. So it's good to see you here. What is it like seeing Curry light up an arena like that? And in your days of having seen arenas lit up, I just mentioned, the shrug that happened in the Jordan's game, the 26-year anniversary that happened over the weekend.
Rich, I was at the game last night, and being a former player, being a point guard, I could shoot a little bit. But when I was watching the games last night, I realized that Steph Curry is perhaps the greatest shot maker the game has seen. The variety of how he makes shots, whether it's off the dribble, transition, coming off screens. He's just an incredible shot maker. And to watch him consistently display the accuracy that he has game in and game out in high-pressure situations, he's just a phenomenal shooter. So, if I saw a guy make 7 or 8 threes in my heyday, I would be like, oh, he's hot. Steph Curry consistently does this night in and night out. This is who he is, and it's been incredible to watch as he's making this run over the last 4 years.
So, it's amazing. We did the math. Our coordinating producer, Don Bowie, told me this moments before you came out here. The most threes you shot in your career in a season was 253 threes in the 94-95 season.
He probably does that in a week.
The most that Curry's taken in his career in 15-16 Warriors, 886 threes. I'll do the math for you. That's 633 more than you
Incredible.
Attempted. And that's the game has totally changed. Is that an influence of Kerr, do you think, here? What do you think?
I think it's an influence of the game. The game is trying to find space. You try to find space for great players to operate. And Steph Curry really, he made a step in the game to really change the game. He just kept moving out to create space. And I think that was kind of the lead, if you will, of small ball, because he created more space. And, you look for space in the interior. You had a guard like Michael Jordan, for instance, who was a guard who went and played really on the post. And then you have a guard like Steph Curry who just started at the three-point line and kept going further and further back, which really created an opportunity for the other team to say, the only way we can defend him is to get smaller players out there that can defend farther away from the basket. So Steph Curry has really changed the game, if you will, because he keeps moving further and further back, which creates space on the floor. He created this space now that you have that you just didn't see 15 or 20 years ago.
Well, I mean, so then you have unique perspective here, being an agent for Draymond Green, JaVale McGee, the Wasserman Group that you're the EVP for and managing executive. The media group also represents Clay, so that's 3 of the 5 starters.
Yes.
And you played with Steve Kerr. So what is Kerr's influence? What is the influence of maybe his playing days or Phil Jackson's? I mean, I'm trying to put all these pieces together for the latest dynasty that we're seeing forming in Oakland right now.
Well, I think Steve Kerr, what he brings is, one, he's incredibly organized in how he sees the game. And he's not trying to be when I played. He's actually, when we talk, and I talk to Steve, he actually has a sense of this generation of player. He can communicate. I think that is his strength, his ability to communicate with this generation of player. What Steve has done is allowed these players and encouraged these players to be who they are. Draymond Green, he encourages Draymond to be Draymond Green. He encourages Steph Curry. He encourages Clay. What he did for JaVale to keep JaVale interested and engaged so that maybe he wasn't playing in the last series as much, and all of a sudden in game 2 he starts and he comes up and he plays big. So I think Steve Kerr's ability to communicate with this generation of player has been nothing short of remarkable, and his ability to organize. And you can see the way his team plays, and they're figuring it out. They've been doing this for 4 years, and anyone who's played understands, it's hard to listen to the same voice for 4 years, especially when you go for this length of time. Mm-hmm. And Steve Kerr somehow, some way has been able to figure this out.
Now, there was a great article, or an interesting article in the Bleacher Report just a couple weeks ago where Howard Beck wrote about Draymond and Steve Kerr's relationship and how it was never really hunky-dory from the get-go.
Right.
That there had to be the moment in the locker room in Oklahoma City between Kerr and Draymond arguing with each other. How did that all come about from your perspective, B.J. Armstrong?
Well, and watching it, listening to it, and obviously working with Draymond. So I heard Draymond's perspective, and I heard Coach Kerr's perspective. And the thing is, Steve is very, very intense. He looks kind of laid back. You would never sense that. I think him and Draymond are more similar than they probably will let on. And it was just an opportunity for them to see each other and see each other for who they are. They're both incredibly competitive. Second, they are stubborn. Both are very, very stubborn. And I thought that situation where they collided, if you will, or they had this argument, was really for them to see an opportunity of how much each other they want to win. It all came down to wanting to win. And those two, they butted heads there. But at the same time, I think there was a respect factor saying, why are we doing this? And they were only doing it for they wanted the same thing, which is they wanted to win. They wanted to win badly, and both of them are very stubborn. But I think that situation has allowed their relationship to move on and really flourish here in the future. And I think they've come to realize that, you know what, we're actually the same person. And I think they have a great relationship now.
Is Draymond Green occasionally needing to be cooled down in the business world, the business side of things, in the same way that you see the coach needing to have him pump his brakes for this competitive?
I think, Rich, if you calm Draymond Green down, I don't think he's Draymond Green. You have to allow him to be who he is.
And that is who?
That is the one who's always pushing the envelope. He's always right there on the edge. Draymond Green, physically, he isn't the biggest man. He isn't the strongest player. He's a very strong player, but he isn't the strongest person on the floor. What he is his basketball IQ is off the charts. I mean, he's like a basketball savant. He knows not only his position, he knows what's going on the entire floor. He is perhaps one of the smartest players I've ever been around. I don't care which generation. When you talk basketball with Draymond Green, you better know what you're talking about, because he knows the plays, he knows the referees, he knows the coaches, he knows everything that's going on the floor. And when you talk to him about basketball, he can go on and on and on and on. He loves the game.
But he doesn't know sometimes where the line is.
I think he knows. Yes. Draymond knows.
So he's not out of control.
He's not out of control. Draymond is not out of control. He understands he's looking for every advantage he can get on the floor. Back in our day, there was a thing with the Pistons where, players would actually go out there and you would try to intimidate players. There was gamesmanship within the game.
Mahorn, Lambeer, that sort of stuff.
Mahorn, Lambeer, Isaiah Thomas. Draymond Green grew up in that era. He's from Saginaw. Mm-hmm. He understands that. And I think you don't see that as much with today's youth as you did in our generation. But Draymond is a throwback.
He could play for the Bad Boys.
He could have played for the Bad Boys. He could have played for those old New York Knicks teams. He could have played in that era because Draymond always has gamesmanship going on. Intimidation was a part of our era. This is what Draymond brings to this era. You don't see it as much, but absolutely 100% he knows exactly what he's doing.
I want to take a 60-second break, and when we come back with you, B.J. Armstrong, I want to throw back the clock a little bit. The conversation of Jordan and LeBron it's dominated, and I'd love to get your 2 cents on that subject, as well as interpret the body language that we saw from LeBron James on Thursday night in video that just surfaced this morning. I'd love to get that.
No question.
B.J. Armstrong, right here on The Rich Eisen Show when you're back in 60 seconds. Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals is tonight. We'll discuss that. Peter Gammons will join us in the baseball world. The Yankees and ESPN appear to be butting heads. We'll hit that.
Ridiculous story.
There are no fewer than 4 mandatory minicamps going down in the National Football League, including the one in New England, Brady and Gronk. Their status, that is upcoming. Mm-hmm. But for the moment, I turn to my right and I see B.J. Armstrong here for another segment on The Rich Eisen Show. 11 seasons in the NBA, 7 of them with the Chicago Bulls, winning all those championships and being around Michael Jordan. Your thoughts on this comparison of Jordan versus LeBron James would be what, B.J. Armstrong?
Well, I can see from a fan perspective the comparison, right? They're both wing players. LeBron's about 6'8", Jordan's about 6'6", and they've both been the most dominant players in their era. But when I look at it, and I look at it from the detail as a player, as an ex-player, they're two totally different players. LeBron is a facilitator. LeBron initiates. LeBron will do things that I don't think Jordan was asked to do, but more importantly, I don't think he had to do it. You know, LeBron will initiate the offense. He'll score a little bit. He'll rebound a little bit. He'll do all the things within the team. Michael Jordan was a scorer first, second, and third. He was a phenomenal finisher of the game. And what I mean by that is Michael Jordan stopped playing the game. He stopped having to facilitate. He didn't have to do all those things. He just finished the game. He finished it. He was, I think, the game's greatest finisher because he had no weakness in his game. When he played the game, especially in the fourth quarter, we refer to him as a three-dimensional player. He's either going to score, he's going to get fouled, or he was going to go to the free throw line and make the 2 free throws. And not many players can do that in the last 4 minutes of a game. Jordan was the best. He was just three-dimensional in every way, every phase of the game, especially coming down the stretch. I think LeBron in this year's playoff run, I thought he has done a much better job than he has in years past at being a finisher.
Well, the answer to that would be is he has to because you know, Pippen is a top 50 player of all time. You know, other than Dwayne Wade in his entire career, who else has he had in that regard? I know Bosch.
Well, you know, the way the game is played, you know, the game is just a different game today. I would have loved to have seen LeBron play in our era, but I would also love to see Jordan play in this year because Jordan wasn't a three-point shooter. Jordan wasn't a shooter per se. He was a scorer. So it would be fun to really see how they would play the different styles. That, you know, if I put Jordan in this era, no hand checking. I mean, the guy averaged 37 points a night with hand checking. What would that translate into today's game where you can't touch him? But then I would love to see LeBron with his physicality that he has, because he's just an imposing figure. I would love to have seen him play against those physical.
Would have somebody with an arm bar right in the small of his back.
I would have loved to have seen how he would have played against the Charles Oakleys and the Rick Mahorns and the Buck Williams and the physicality of the game. So it would have been fun to play, but without question, I want to say this about both. LeBron James is this generation's best player. And I think Jordan was clearly that generation's best player. Now, who's the best? I think I'm biased. I would say Michael Jordan, just because mentally what he was able to do, and I knew him. Michael Jordan is not going to back away from any level of competition or any, player that comes up. I think LeBron James would meet the challenge because he will pose some problems for a player like a Jordan, any player, because he's 6'8", 260. But I would have loved to seen the matchup. But I'm going to say Michael Jordan without question.
B.J. Armstrong here on the Rich Eisen Show. I have to have you tell the story you told me and Suze when you stopped on our podcast about playing with Jordan. And is it really true he never knew what the score of the game was? I mean, was that really the case, B.J.?
Well, I think he knew what the score was, but he made a conscious effort to always treat the game as if the game was always 0-0. It was such a unique perspective because Michael Jordan always wanted to play that possession, and he was trapped like in that moment. And that's what I learned about him. He never, when you get up 20, there's a natural tendency to have a letdown. There's a natural tendency to maybe back away. Michael Jordan was always 0-0, always. If you ask him today what the score of the game is, he's going to always approach it at 0-0, which kept him in that moment. He never let down. He constantly kept the pressure on you offensively, defensively, mentally, emotionally.
Including in the huddle?
Including in the huddles. And if you asked him what was the score, it was 0-0. And that, to me, was a different way to approach the game. And there were so many things that were different about the way he approached the game and the way I or many of the other players in the NBA. I mean, who goes out and you're up 20 and you're still playing the game if the score was tied? But he did that. He took practice that way. That was his approach to practice. That was his approach to the game. And if you ask him, Rich, when you see him, he's going to, without question, say it's 0-0.
But he would also bait young players into asking
the
him
young
that?
guys. We had a thing in Chicago called silly fines. And if we were up big, especially in the game, we would ask the younger players, the rookies, hey, what's the score of the game? And then, of course, the rookie would look up and he'd tell the score of the game, and that was a silly fine. So he wanted to make sure that everyone else was engaged into the game as well. But it was kind of our thing.
Now, where did the silly fines go into?
It went into it was our
Fund?
fund of money that we all had. We all had there in case there was something going on in the team, and we would shoot for it.
What do you mean by something going on in the team?
Something going on, like, it was, we would like to, bet about who's going to make the most free throws during practice, or who's going to make shots, or who's going to do things. So it was our little fund of money that we like to play. Little kitty money that we always had.
Very good. B.J. Armstrong here on the Rich Eisen Show. Speaking of not knowing the score, J.R. Smith not knowing the score at the end of that game. Have you ever seen a situation like that before? Playing college, playing pro, agenting pro. Have you ever seen anything like at the end of game one before?
I've seen that before in that particular setting. At that time and place, I haven't seen it. I mean, that's one of the biggest moments, right? For it to have he just had a mental lapse, to say the least. It's very unfortunate, very devastating play for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, there's no way to get around it. For him not to be aware of the time and score, in particular at that specific time of the game, that's unacceptable for a veteran. And I think you saw LeBron's reaction. I think you saw the players around him reaction, the coaches. To not be aware of the time and score at that time, I don't know what to really say, and I don't think there's anything for him to say other than, you know what, I just had a mental lapse, and you move on.
Well, I mean, in the first blush moments of trying to move on, there's now video, as we've seen this morning.
Right.
And when you say, well, there's nothing to say, they literally were not talking to each other.
Right.
And I don't know if Ty Lue is deciding, all right, I'm going to strategize and let them hash it out and then come on in, whatever coaching philosophy that was or whatever. But when you see LeBron's reaction to finding out that there was still a timeout remaining, what's your reaction to seeing that video, BJ?
Well, you never take these opportunities for granted. And it's one thing about LeBron James I've come to respect over the years. He's very aware of what's going on, not only in his particular situation, but he's aware of everything that's going on around him. Mm-hmm. LeBron James knows with this Golden State Warriors team, game one was very, very important because game one is kind of the fill-out game. He went for it, and I give him credit for that. He was going for the win in game one to set the stage for the entire series. I mean, he came out.
But what's going through those temples when he put his head in the...
When he put it, I think he was devastated. I think that was his moment of like, that was our chance, and we blew our chance to win that game and possibly that series. I don't think there's any way to go around it. I mean, you don't put your hands in your head during the NBA Finals, during the game, especially when you know you have overtime to play the game. I think that was just a moment that they had where they had a chance to win it. I mean, you have a chance to win game one on the road in the finals versus the Golden State Warriors. You don't let that opportunity slip by. If you miss the shot, so be it. But to have a mental lapse like that, I think was just devastating. And you saw it, how they performed in the overtime. I think they didn't move on. They didn't turn the page. I think they were stuck there, and I think it took them a couple of days. I thought, in game two, they rebounded. But to lose that opportunity, I think is just because you never know when you're going to get that chance back. And to lose the game that way, it was just took the air out of them, if you will.
So before we take one more break and then have you finish the hour of this, and if you're on hold, please stay on hold and we'll take all your calls at the top of the next hour. I'm going to spin the conversation forward because I know they're probably even having this conversation on the split screen hashtag BarkFest on some other networks and other radio shows. That LeBron should have snapped out of it. He's the leader of the team. He's the guy. He should have been the one running the huddle. He's the de facto coach anyway that everybody thinks there is. He should not have been lost in that moment, as crazy bat guano insane as it really was, that he should have snapped out of it and let everybody, that it could have been a different result. How do you respond to what I'm sure is going to be out there, if not already?
Well, when you're playing, you're emotionally involved in the game. Mm-hmm. You have everything you have in that moment. LeBron James, it's hard as a player in that moment to just really separate the emotion of what's going on at the time. I mean, he's trying to look at the game, time and score. He was looking at the situation, and all of a sudden, he was emotionally like, what is going on? It was kind of like no one knew what was going on. If you look at the tape, The defense didn't know what was going
Nobody.
on. No one knew what was going on other than JR. JR was the only one that was kind of.
And you could say he didn't even know what was
Yeah,
going on.
he didn't know what was going on. So
also.
everyone was kind of like, there was a moment of confusion.
I'm with you.
Yes.
You can't. I mean, he's a human being.
He's a human being.
And nobody could expect why. And you know, I know everyone's gonna be like, why didn't Ty call a timeout? And even LeBron's reaction was there's he had a timeout. Nobody knew what the hell he was doing. And by the time he was already beyond the 3-point arc, there was 1 second left. Now, obviously, he can make a play, but all right, I want to take a break, come back, and just get a couple more cents about the future for LeBron and the Warriors, best you can tell from your agenting point of view.
Yes.
BJ Armstrong here, at BJ Armstrong on Twitter. You're on hold. Please stay on hold here on The Rich Eisen Show. All right, one more segment with BJ Armstrong. In the Key with BJ Armstrong and Gerald Brown on Podcast One every single week. You enjoying doing the podcast?
Love it, Rich. It's something that you never know what to expect, but it's something that's been great. It's been a great way to engage, but more importantly, to be able to, engage with the clients, people like yourself, and people in the business. So I'm really having a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, you've had Oakley, Desmond Howard, Horace Grant on. Man, that's great stuff.
I've had Rich Eisen on.
You've had me on, yes. You came on the one with me and Suze. It was a nice little home and home. That was fun. What do you think's going to happen with LeBron? You're an agent. What do you think? July 1 hits. What do you think?
Well, the one thing I've come to realize as an agent, nothing is going to happen until LeBron James makes a decision.
Mean anything else?
Nothing
that's going
else.
on?
So LeBron is going to hold up free agency. We every year we get excited, and then when LeBron's in free agency, nothing's going to happen. Day 1, day 2, day 3. Now, once he makes a decision, then the dominoes will fall. So what I think he's going to do, I think he's going to take his time with it. And I think he's going to look at a couple of places, right? Whether that's coming out on the West Coast. There's been a lot of speculation about Los Angeles or all these different places. Mm-hmm. But I think he's going to take his time to see where can he beat the Warriors. Because if you come on the West Coast, can you put together a team that can actually beat them? I don't think so. But I think staying in the East will give him the best chance to prepare to beat the Warriors. Because if the Warriors are able to stick together, I mean, they're young enough to where they're going to be around for the next 3 or 4 years.
Now, in the 2 minutes I have left, I mean, Wasserman and the whole group there got 3 of the starters. I mean, the disease of more, as you know, is something Pat Riley always talked about, that's what breaks up the disease of more. Klay Thompson's already said essentially like, hey, I live out on the coast. I'm winning championships. I'm a happy guy. Draymond Green, is he a guy that's going to want to get paid? Well,
I think the Warriors will have to make, obviously, some business decisions, without question. Now, what those decisions are going to be, who knows? But the decisions are going to have to be made, and Pat Riley, I think he nailed it. The disease of more. We called it in Chicago the me factor. The me factor is going to come in, and everyone is going to, at some point, want to be paid for their worth or what their perceived worth whatever they feel it is. So I think that will come into play. When I say come into play, contracts and all those things, the business of basketball, the business of sport will come into play. I do think the Warriors will figure it out because the Warriors have a unique situation where all those players were drafted with the exception of Kevin Durant. So I think they can figure it out. But you know what? It's one of those problems I would love to have if I was an owner because they've been to the finals with the possibility and the potential to win 3 out of the 4. So I think it's one that will figure itself out as they move forward.
Is this something you talk about with Draymond? Like, hey, you got a good spot here?
I do not. I think it's because I'm superstitious as a player. I never talk as an ex-player. Mm-hmm. So I never like to talk about the financial part of it with players, especially during the season. Mm-hmm. At the right time, we will have a conversation about it. Mm-hmm. But this isn't the time now. Right now is for him to focus in on what he's doing, what he needs to be doing, which is focusing in on this moment in time. I mean, to be here with an opportunity to win 3 out of the 4 championships in 4 years, that's not something that you do every day.
It's rare. At BJ Armstrong on Twitter, In the Key with BJ Armstrong and Gerald Brown on Podcast One. I love having you here. Let's do it more
Rich,
often.
thank you. I appreciate it.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.